I'm here with Jocelyn, who's going to tell us a little bit about the EQUIP top picks for 2023. So thanks for being with us, Joss.
No worries.
And firstly, just tell us about what are top picks?
Yeah, good question. Well, the top picks are 10 books that we pick to go alongside the EQUIP conference each year. Rather than having a really long book list or a big book stall, we try and focus on picking 10 books that we think are going to be really great reads, strong recommends. In that list, we have 4 kind of books that we repeat every year. We have a book for kids, a picture book. We have a book for teens, something aimed at that kind of tween to teen age. We try and pick a classic read, a book that we think has stood the test of time. And we also have a book that we think would be suitable for non-Christians or new Christians to read.
And to give away.
Yeah, that's right.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Just tell us quickly, before we look at them, a lot of us feel a bit time poor. What is the value of reading Christian books?
Yeah, well, obviously we get to know God through reading the Bible, through hearing His Word taught. We know and love Him through that. But another way that we can know and love God is by reading what other Christians have written about, what they've read in the Bible, what they know about God, and going really deeply into certain areas. You can kind of fill holes that we have or areas that we want to think more deeply about. Yeah. So it's really another tool we can use to help us grow as Christians. And the other thing that I really like about it is I feel like it links us to the universal church. Like obviously so much of church is just with the people in our own spaces. But by reading a book that's written by a Christian woman on the other side of the world, I somehow have some sort of fellowship with her. One day I'll be around the throne of God with her, and having read her book, there'll be something, that's in common there in a way. And you can also read thought by Christians that have died, that have lived long ago. So it kind of links you in with the church in a much bigger way to read widely what other Christians have.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful way of thinking about it. So start us off then. What is the top picks for this year?
Yeah, well, I'll start with our kids pick. Our kids pick this year is Meg is Not Alone by Megan Hill. And this is a really beautiful little story of a little girl who gets accidentally left at church after the service.
Have you done that?
I've not done that to one of my children. Oh, you have? Oh, or maybe you could give them this as some sort of therapy. No, so it's a lovely story. She gets left, and of course the church family rallies around her. They ring her parents. They look after her till they arrive. And when her dad finally comes back, he says to her, "Oh, isn't it wonderful how God looked after you?" And she's confused. God? It was just the people at church. And he kind of has this lovely teaching moment with her of, that's how God shows His love for us sometimes through His people. So it's a lovely little lesson in a storybook for kids.
Excellent. The teens one?
The teens pick. So we've gone with a Chris Morphew book, which we've done before because we just love his books. They're so great for that.
They're little, aren't they?
They're little. They're easy to read. Actually, I think they're quite helpful for adults too because he does just distill big truths into small books. This one, How Can I Feel Closer to God, kind of answers the question, well, how do you have a relationship with God? Like He's not there in front of you. What does that look like? And he looks at things like prayer and Bible reading and meeting with other Christians and habits in the Christian life that help us grow closer to God. And it fits nicely with our theme this year of God with us, this book. So that's why we've put it on the list.
Excellent. Now the classic?
The classic, and you can tell it's a classic because it's come off my dusty bookshelf.
It's got a few coffee stains.
It's got a few coffee stains. It's got that smell of old book. The Trellis and the Vine is a bit of a ministry classic. So this thinking has really shaped a lot of ministry thinking in Australia and further abroad as well. The Trellis and the Vine is about how sometimes we kind of build up these structures around ministry, like programs and activities that we run, but we forget it's actually the vine, the people, and the people growing as disciples of Christ that we want to be focusing on. So it looks at that metaphor as a way for exploring how we do ministry. So if you're in ministry, I think it's an essential read to think about.
Fantastic. And then one that's a good giveaway for an unbeliever.
Yes. Yeah. So this book, 7 Reasons to Reconsider Christianity, I think is a really great book to give to a non-Christian or a young Christian. It kind of outlines some reasons why you should consider the claims of Jesus and why it's important to explore Christianity as an adult, or if you've fallen away, you could think again about these things because these things really matter.
A special story behind this book?
Yeah. So Ben Shaw is a Christian minister, and just as he started writing this book, he was actually diagnosed with a cancer that would prove terminal. So as he wrote this book, he was facing his own death. And he has a beautiful postscript at the end about that journey and how facing his own death, he really had to look at Christianity Christianity again himself, and think, is this going to hold up facing death? That the claims of Jesus are true? And he comes away saying yes, and actually more than that, it gave him the strength to face death, knowing what was on the other side for him. So it's a really powerful book, really easy to read, and I'd recommend buying a stack and giving them away. We've got this book too. This is by Jodie McIver. She's an Australian midwife. She's been through Bible college and she's a mum. And so she's written this lovely book called Bringing Forth Life about pregnancy and birth as a Christian mum, or a non-Christian could read it too, I think. So she does a lot of the physical side of pregnancy, but she also looks at the emotional journey and the spiritual significance. What's God doing in pregnancy and birth?
So this is good if you're pregnant, but also what, a husband or
a
just
husband
a friend?
could read this, or it'd be lovely gift at a baby shower. I think it's a really lovely book to give to pregnant women in your life.
There's one there particularly for this year?
Yes, so we have a book called The Promise is His Presence by Glenna Marshall. And in that book, Glenna traces kind of the biblical theology, the story through the Bible of God's presence with us, which is our conference topic this year, God with Us. So she traces that beautifully through the book and interweaves it with stories of her own journey as a Christian. She went through infertility, she suffered chronic pain, and then also had some really terrible church hurt in her background. And she kind of talks about how God's presence is so significant to her in her journey as a Christian. It's a very personal read, but also really helpful as we think about our topic this year.
One by Jane Tour?
Jane Tour and Graham Bayan have written a book together called Embracing Complementarianism. So if you're wanting to delight in God's good design for men and women, what does that look like practically in the church? This is a really great resource for churches and for people thinking about ministry as men and women. How do we celebrate the gifts God's given us, but using them in the good order that God has put.
And sort of some Q&As and just some case studies in there.
Yeah, it's a really great, warm-hearted, engaging book, and I think really positive for churches.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Now, another one by Paul Grimond.
Paul Grimond. We're big Paul Grimond fans at EQUIP.
We are.
We had him last year in interview, and we interviewed him in the main program, and we had his book Suffering Well, which a lot of people really enjoyed reading that last year. So we have another book by him, When the Noise Won't Stop. And in this book, he deals with the topic of anxiety, which is so common for so many people, and Paul suffers with it himself. So he kind of has written a real Christian guide to anxiety, thinking about it from a biblical perspective, but also a pastoral perspective, caring for those who have anxiety or looking after yourself if you do have it. And just addressing some big questions around it too. So this would be a great book if you have anxiety or if you're caring for someone who does.
Yeah, which is all of us really, isn't
That's
it?
right.
At some season of life.
That's it.
Yeah.
We also have a book from Andrew Sheed on our list this year.
Brand new one.
It's a brand new one, only just released, called Walk His Way.
Yep.
And this book is based on his talks that he did at a missionary conference just last year. And it's about the book of Psalms. So in the book, he kind of dives deeply into 8 Psalms, but he also has a look at the whole overarching story of Psalms, which I didn't really realise was a thing.
I did not realise either. There's some structure
There's
to how
a beautiful structure, and
goes.
he kind of draws out how different Psalms point to Christ.
Yeah.
And it's a really edifying book because he's written it as talks. It's quite challenging and personal, so a really great read. Yeah.
Last one.
Last one. And I kept this one to last.
This is your favourite, isn't it?
It's my favourite this year, I have to say.
But it's the most expensive.
It's the most expensive. It's a bit thicker. It's hardback. But the reason I think it's my favourite is it's the book that kind of changed my thinking the most this year, that really challenged me the most. It's called You're Only Human, and in it the author talks about how as humans, God actually designed us as limited in our capacity. We're finite, we're creatures, and he's not. And sometimes we think that our limits are sin. We can think, because I can't do all the things I feel like I ought to do, because I get tired and weary, that's sinful, when actually it's just part of how we're created. So he kind of looks at that in different ways, like how we use our time, how we think about using our gifts.
Or when we can't do the things we want to do.
That's right.
Look after people.
I found it really deeply encouraging and actually freeing to read this book. I really enjoyed reading it. So that's a strong recommend from me.
Wow. Well, thank you, Joss. Sounds like a fantastic, I don't know really which ones I want to pick out of your top picks, but thank you very much for doing so much reading for us.
No worries at all.
Very quickly, if we want to buy these books, what's the best way to do that?
If you jump on the website, the EQUIP23 page, there's a link to Reformers Bookshop. So Reformers have set it up so that a percentage of our sales go to support our missionary, Em, who's in a secure location.
Yep.
Can't say her name, she is a real person doing real ministry.
Very good ministry, yeah.
So you can support her too by buying books. And you can also find on our website reviews by the committee of all these books if you want to look into them further.
Fantastic. Thank you, Joss.
No worries.